Have you ever wondered why the thoughts that poison you the most are always the ones that refuse to die, clinging to the walls of your mind like shadows that feed on your attention, your ambition, your peace? Machiavelli would tell you that the mind is a battlefield long before life becomes one, and those who fail to tame their inner world are destined to be ruled by it. He would say that the most dangerous tyrant you will ever face is not a king, not a rival, not a schemer pulling threads in the dark. It is the voice inside you that whispers fear, doubt, envy, rage, hesitation, memories you wish you could erase, and futures that terrify you. This voice does not sleep. It watches, it waits, it strikes when you're weakest, and unless you learn to dominate it completely, it will dominate you without mercy. Imagine, for a moment, that the architecture of your mind is a great fortress, stone walls rising into the sky, gates sealed, torches lit along the corridors of thought, but inside this fortress are rooms you never open, corridors you pretend not to see, doors half closed because you fear what waits behind them. These rooms contain the thoughts you have tried to bury, the betrayals, the humiliations, the regrets like rust on your memory, the conversations replayed endlessly in the quiet moments, the faces of those who hurt you, the words that cut deeper than any blade. Machiavelli would say that you cannot rule a kingdom while ignoring half of it, and the same is true of your inner dominion. If you refuse to confront the rooms where your toxic thoughts hide, they will step forward and rule the throne you abandoned. In The Prince, Machiavelli warned that territories left unattended will rebel. People left unmanaged will conspire. Enemies left alive will return stronger. Thoughts are no different. A toxic thought ignored is not a thought defeated. It is a thought waiting to grow, to harden, to carve itself into the foundation of who you are. And when it does, it becomes part of your nature without your permission. You begin to act like the fears you never confronted. You begin to shrink according to the doubts you never silenced. You become a servant to the emotions you never learned to command. Machiavelli believed that power belongs to the one who shapes reality before reality shapes him. And the reality of your life begins with the reality of your mind. You have felt this, haven't you? That heaviness in your chest when you wake up. That unease pulling at your attention when you try to focus. That familiar soundtrack of self-sabotage whispering that you are not enough, not capable, not disciplined, not worthy. Toxic thoughts do not always appear in dramatic form. They often arrive softly, disguised as caution, disguised as realism, disguised as something that sounds honest but is actually an assassin sent to kill your potential. Machiavelli would say that poison is always most effective when it does not taste like poison. And your toxic thoughts taste like truth because they know that truth is the quickest way to penetrate your defenses. But there is something deeper beneath all of this, the question of control. Who controls your mind? Who controls your focus? Who controls the narrative you believe about yourself? To Machiavelli, the greatest ruler is the one who rules himself, a ruler who commands his impulses, shapes his desires, directs his fears. He believed that power does not belong to the strongest or the smartest, but to the most disciplined, the most self-aware, the one who can stand in the fire of his own mind without flinching. The world may attack you from the outside, but the mind attacks you from the inside, and the inside war is always the more devastating one. You can lose everything in life and rebuild it if your mind remains your ally, but if your mind becomes your enemy, nothing you build will last. And this is why deleting toxic thoughts and sharpening your focus is not just a psychological task. It is a strategic act of survival, a Machiavellian act, a ruthless one, because the mind, left to its own chaos, is not neutral. It seeks comfort, it seeks excuses, it seeks the path of least resistance. It seeks familiarity, even if that familiarity is self-destruction. A mind without leadership is a kingdom doomed to rot from within. When Machiavelli spoke of the fox and the lion, he was not merely giving advice about political tactics. He was giving insight into human psychology. The fox is the part of you that deceives others, but it is also the part that deceives you. It whispers illusions. It rationalizes weakness. It creates mental traps. It paints fantasies that distract you from reality. The lion is the force of will, the courage, the raw dominance that threatens to act without thinking. Both, if imbalanced, create chaos. Too much fox, and you live in illusions. Too much lion, and you act without control. But the ruler who masters both gains full command of his internal world. That balance is the key to erasing toxic thoughts, not by suppressing them, but by understanding them, confronting them, and bending them to your will. Machiavelli taught that every enemy has a purpose. Even those who betray you teach you something about loyalty. Even those who hurt you teach you something about vulnerability. Even those who humiliate you teach you something about pride. Toxic thoughts are internal enemies, but they have their own strategic value. They reveal the fractures in your defenses. Machiavelli believed that reputations determine destiny. Not just the reputation you have with others, but the reputation you have with yourself. When a toxic thought appears and you bow to it, when you let it distract you, weaken you, control you, you teach your mind that you are someone who can be dominated, someone who obeys fear, someone who follows doubt. But when a toxic thought appears and you do not flinch, when you dissect it, expose it, dismantle it, you teach your mind that you are the authority, that you decide what deserves attention. That focus is not optional, it is law. Ask yourself this: what reputation do you have with your own mind? Do you behave like someone who commands thoughts, or someone who surrenders to them? Do your thoughts see you as a ruler, or as a slave? Machiavelli would say that if your mind does not fear disappointing you, it will never obey you. And obedience is everything. Focus is obedience. Discipline is obedience. Ambition is obedience. Without it, you drift. You waste time, you crumble beneath invisible pressures. You become a spectator in your own life, watching opportunities slip through your fingers. Deleting toxic thoughts is not a gentle process. It is not soft. It is not calming. It is ruthless. It is surgical. It is the psychological equivalent of eliminating traitors before they can stage a coup. You must walk into the darkest hallways of your mind with torches raised, with unwavering authority, with the cold determination of someone who refuses to be ruled by ghosts. You must confront memories you avoided for years, emotions you pretended were not there, wounds you never allowed to heal, and you must face them not with pity but with strategy. You are not here to feel better, you are here to take control, and control begins with awareness, a deep, unfiltered, uncompromising understanding of your inner landscape. Machiavelli believed that rulers fail not because their enemies are strong, but because they misunderstand their territory. They misread the people. They misjudge the obstacles. They assume stability where there is unrest. You do the same when you underestimate your inner chaos, when you pretend that your mind is fine, when you pretend you are unaffected, when you pretend your anxiety, your guilt, your unresolved anger are merely just thoughts. They are not just thoughts. They are forces, and if you do not dominate them, they will dominate you. But here is the truth Machiavelli understood better than anyone. The mind is loyal to clarity. The mind is loyal to authority. The mind is loyal to the one who leads it. And once you conquer your toxic thoughts, once you strip them of their emotional weapons, once you confront them with unshakable honesty, your focus sharpens like a blade. You begin to notice what truly matters. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw problems. You begin to build momentum where you once felt stuck. You begin to act like someone who is becoming dangerous in the best sense, dangerous to the version of yourself that once held you back. This is the beginning of psychological power, Machiavellian power, the power to reshape your inner world so that the outer world bends to your will. And as you step deeper into this journey, you will realize that the path to conquering your life begins with conquering your thoughts, one battlefield at a time, until your mind becomes a fortress. No toxic idea can enter. No distraction can penetrate. No fear can command. This is how you delete toxic thoughts. This is how you stay focused. This is how you rise with Machiavellian precision, not by fleeing your shadows, but by mastering them. You must understand something Machiavelli saw. Long before modern psychology gave it language, the mind is never empty. It is always occupied by something. An idea, an emotion, a memory, a projection, a hunger, a fear. And if you do not choose what occupies it, something else will. Nature abhors a vacuum, but the mind fears it. Emptiness is terrifying because it forces you to face yourself without distraction, without noise, without narrative. And this is why toxic thoughts find fertile ground inside you. They enter the moment you grow quiet, the moment your guard drops, the moment your attention loosens, the moment you are alone with the silence that feels like a mirror. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous kingdoms are the ones left undefended, and the same is true of the mind. When you stop actively ruling your inner world, a new ruler emerges, the darker part of you, the one that thrives in the shadows you refuse to illuminate. This is the part of you that remembers every failure in perfect detail while forgetting every victory. It exaggerates losses and minimizes strengths. It keeps count of every slight, every rejection, every moment of embarrassment, collecting them like trophies. And when you try to move forward with your life, this part of you whispers that you are not ready, not capable, not worthy, that you should stay where you are, because the world outside the walls of your comfort is cold and relentless. But Machiavelli would tell you that comfort is the most subtle form of imprisonment. It feels like safety, but in reality, it dulls your instinct, weakens your resolve, and keeps you loyal to a life that no longer serves your ambition. To delete toxic thoughts, you must first confront the addiction you have to them, because toxic thoughts are addictive. Not pleasurable, not desirable, but addictive. You return to them because they remind you of the limits you believe you cannot surpass. They anchor you to a familiar identity, a painful one, yes, but one you know intimately. Machiavelli understood that humans cling to the familiar even when it destroys them, because the familiar offers predictability, and predictability gives the illusion of control. People stay in dying relationships because they fear loneliness more than unhappiness. They stay in dead-end jobs because they fear uncertainty more than stagnation. They stay attached to toxic thoughts because those thoughts give shape to the chaos within them, even if that shape is carved from fear. But control built on fear is not control, it is submission. Submission to an internal tyrant that lives inside you. And Machiavelli knew that tyrants only grow stronger when they are not challenged. Toxic thoughts become powerful not because they are true, but because you never question them. You treat them as authority. You obey them without resistance. You accept every accusation they make. You allow them to shape how you see yourself. You grant them legitimacy. And once they have legitimacy, they become part of your identity. Deleting toxic thoughts is therefore not an act of erasure. It is an act of rebellion, a revolt against the entrenched monarchy of your own insecurities. It is the overthrow of an internal regime. And like any revolution, it begins with the recognition that the current ruler is unfit to lead. Think of the thoughts that torment you, the ones that appear at night when you try to sleep, the ones that sabotage your focus when you finally sit down to work, the ones that whisper cruel predictions about your future or painful reminders of your past. These thoughts behave like old political advisors whispering poison into the ear of a weak king. They speak with the authority of truth, but they are liars. They claim to protect you, but they imprison you. They claim to warn you, but they paralyze you. They claim to be realism, but they are fear disguised with eloquence. And Machiavelli taught that rulers must be wary of advisors who speak beautifully while secretly seeking to weaken the throne. A toxic thought is exactly that, a traitorous advisor living inside your head, one that uses your emotions as leverage and your memories as weapons. You cannot negotiate with such an advisor. You cannot persuade it. You cannot reason with it. You can only strip it of power by questioning the foundation it stands on. Machiavelli believed that power is sustained only by what people believe. And your toxic thoughts survive only because you believe them. They feed off your trust. They rely on your willingness to accept them without scrutiny. They count on your passivity. And the moment you turn your gaze toward them with interrogation rather than obedience, they begin to wither. The question is, why do you believe them? Why do you trust the voice that hurts you the most? Why do you cling to the thoughts that have done nothing but poison your potential? Part of the answer lies in the way the human mind evolved. Your brain is not wired for ambition, it is wired for survival. It overestimates threats. It exaggerates risks. It fixates on failures because failure once meant death. It remembers pain more vividly than pleasure because pain kept your ancestors alive. This means your brain is biased toward negativity. It is a fortress built to protect you, not empower you. But Machiavelli would argue that a fortress used for protection becomes a prison if you never leave it. And this is where most people fail. They mistake their protective instincts for truth. They mistake their fear for wisdom. They mistake their trauma for identity. They mistake their insecurities for self-awareness. Machiavelli understood that rulers must step outside the safe boundaries of their own fortress if they wish to expand their domain. The same is true for you. If you wish to grow, you must step beyond the psychological walls built by your past. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of two worlds, the world of who you are and the world of who you could become. Between these two worlds lies a bridge made of focus. Unwavering, disciplined, sharpened focus. Toxic thoughts dissolve that bridge. They splinter it. They weaken its foundation. They whisper that the other side is too far, too dangerous, too costly. They whisper that you might fall, and the moment you believe them, the bridge collapses, and you remain trapped on the side of your old self, the side where you have always been. Staying focused is not simply about ignoring distractions. It is about defeating the inner enemy that wants to keep you small. Machiavelli believed that a ruler must understand the motivations of his enemies, not because he sympathizes with them, but because he needs to predict their actions. Your toxic thoughts have motivations too, self-preservation. They want to survive inside you. They want to continue shaping you. They want to keep their influence, their authority, their throne. So they sabotage your focus in subtle ways, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. They whisper at the exact moment you begin to work. They stir old memories at the exact moment you begin to grow. They highlight your insecurities at the exact moment you begin to take risks. They pull your attention away from your goals and redirect it toward your wounds. Machiavelli would say, this is no accident, this is strategy. Anything that seeks to control you must weaken your focus, because focus is the source of power. Focus is the sharp edge of ambition. Focus is the weapon of the disciplined. Focus is what separates leaders from followers, rulers from subjects, creators from spectators. A mind without focus is a kingdom without order, and a kingdom without order is easy to conquer. But here is the truth Machiavelli understood deeply. You cannot command what you do not understand. And most people do not understand the true nature of their toxic thoughts. They treat them like pests instead of predators. They treat them like irritations instead of insurgents. They treat them like private struggles instead of psychological warfare. But Machiavelli would argue that you cannot win a war you do not acknowledge, so let us acknowledge it. Let us call it by its true name, a rebellion. A rebellion inside your mind. A rebellion led by the parts of you that fear change, fear growth, fear uncertainty, fear becoming someone the world can no longer ignore. These thoughts rise from within like internal conspirators, whispering that ambition is dangerous, that focus is exhausting, that discipline is too harsh, that you should settle for less, that you should cling to the familiar. Machiavelli understood that rebellions must be crushed early, decisively, without hesitation, because hesitation breeds chaos, and chaos breeds weakness, and weakness invites more rebellion. This does not mean suppressing your thoughts. It means confronting them with clarity so sharp that they lose their ability to manipulate you. The moment you begin analyzing a toxic thought instead of obeying it, the illusion breaks. The moment you shine the torch of awareness on it, its power diminishes. And the moment you question its legitimacy, its authority collapses. Toxic thoughts survive only in darkness. Bring them into the light, and they dissolve. But clarity requires courage. Machiavelli believed that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the domination of fear, and you must dominate the thoughts inside you that seek to dominate you. This is not a gentle process. It is not peaceful. It is warfare conducted in silence. It is the quiet, ruthless act of refusing to tolerate anything within you that weakens your future. And this brings us to the deeper truth. Focus is not merely a state of mind, it is an identity. You cannot stay focused if you do not become the kind of person who is loyal to their own goals. You cannot delete toxic thoughts if you still believe they hold value. You cannot rise psychologically if you still cling to emotional debris. Machiavelli would say that loyalty must be earned, not assumed, and your mind will not be loyal to you until you prove yourself capable of leading it. This leadership begins with self-honesty, the kind of honesty that burns, the kind that strips you bare, the kind that exposes every lie you have told yourself to stay comfortable. You must ask yourself, why do I allow these thoughts to live in me? What part of me benefits from their existence? What identity do I preserve by keeping them alive? Because toxic thoughts do not survive unless they serve a psychological purpose. Perhaps they protect you from disappointment. Perhaps they justify your lack of action. Perhaps they allow you to avoid responsibility. Perhaps they keep you from confronting your true potential, which terrifies you more than failure ever could. Machiavelli believed that people fear greatness because greatness demands sacrifice, solitude, discipline, and confrontation with inner demons. Most would rather remain broken than face the cost of becoming whole. And this is why toxic thoughts remain. They offer an escape from the weight of your own potential. But if you want to stay focused, if you want to rise above the mental chaos that has followed you for years, you must make a decision. Either remain loyal to your internal enemy or seize power from it. There is no middle ground. The mind does not share its throne. Only one ruler can exist, your toxic thoughts or your disciplined self. And the disciplined self must be ruthless if it hopes to win. This ruthlessness is not violence. It is clarity. It is discipline. It is the refusal to negotiate with anything inside you that does not contribute to your rise. It is the strategic Machiavellian act of eliminating internal threats before they grow powerful enough to influence your destiny. Toxic thoughts are not just thoughts, they are enemies wearing the mask of truth. And to delete them, you must become the kind of ruler Machiavelli admired, focused, sharp-minded, emotionally disciplined, and unafraid to confront the darkest corners of your psyche. Only then do you rise. Only then do you gain mastery over yourself. Only then do you become someone whose focus cannot be broken. This is the path. And the deeper you walk into it, the more you will discover that the real battle for your future has never been outside you. It has always been within. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must confront a truth so heavy that their entire identity trembles beneath it. Most of the suffering in your mind is self-created, not because you choose it consciously, not because you desire it, but because you have never been taught how to rule your own thoughts. You inherited beliefs you did not choose. You absorbed fears that were not originally yours. You carry shame forged by the mistakes of others. You replay memories that should have been buried. You hold on to insecurities that were handed to you long before you had the strength to question them. And yet you blame yourself for the thoughts that haunt you, even though you never built them. They were given to you like a weapon placed in the hands of a child. Machiavelli would say the true tragedy is not that your thoughts were trained by forces outside you, but that you never reclaimed control from them. A ruler who does not retake his stolen territory deserves to remain conquered. Every toxic thought inside you lives because you feed it. Not intentionally, not willingly, but consistently. You feed it with attention. You feed it with fear. You feed it with silence. You feed it with avoidance. You feed it with the belief that it holds power. And Machiavelli understood that power is never inherent, it is granted. Your thoughts are strong only because you treat them like kings. They give orders and you obey. They make accusations and you accept them. They create doubts and you adopt them as truth. They predict failure and you believe the prophecy. They bring up the past and you collapse into shame. Toxic thoughts do not conquer you. They persuade you to kneel. And once you kneel, you forget you ever had the right to stand. There is a story Machiavelli might have told if he had been a psychologist instead of a political strategist. A story of a man who walked into a prison, not because someone locked him inside, but because the door was open and he stepped in anyway, believing that the chains lying on the floor were meant for him. He put them on willingly because he assumed they belonged to him. The prison was built by his past. The chains were made of his fears. The guards were his toxic thoughts. And yet none of it was real. The walls were illusions. The chains had no locks. The guards were shadows. But he never tried to escape because he believed the prison was part of his identity. And this is what most people do with their minds. They imprison themselves with thoughts that were never meant to rule them. Machiavelli would say that if you do not define yourself, your thoughts will, and they will not choose the strongest version of you. They will choose the weakest, the version shaped by wounds, the version shaped by rejection, the version shaped by insecurity, the version shaped by failure, the version shaped by every dark moment that ever left a mark on your heart. Why? Because weakness is easier to maintain than strength. Weakness requires no discipline, no self-awareness, no resistance. Strength demands vigilance. Strength requires effort. Strength requires you to question every thought that enters your mind and ask, who sent you? What is your purpose? Do you serve my future or sabotage it? Strength is the act of interrogating your own mind like a ruler questioning a potential traitor. But the truth is, most people fear this level of interrogation. They fear confronting their own minds. They fear discovering the truth behind their toxic thoughts. Because what if the thought is right? What if the fear is accurate? What if the insecurity is justified? What if the doubt is true? What if the past predicts the future? And so they avoid the confrontation, believing that avoidance is easier. But avoidance is not easier, it is just quieter. And quiet suffering is the most dangerous kind, because it grows unnoticed until it becomes a force too powerful to ignore. Machiavelli believed that rulers fall not because of sudden attacks, but because of the small, quiet rebellions they failed to address early. Toxic thoughts are exactly this, small rebellions inside your mind that you allow to grow. Each time you ignore them, they gain more territory. Each time you believe them, they gather more soldiers. Each time you obey them, they fortify their position. And eventually, they build a throne inside you. A throne made of your fears, a throne made of your doubts, a throne made of the version of yourself that does not believe you deserve more. And once they sit on that throne, they control your focus. This is why staying focused is so hard. It is not because you are lazy. It is not because you lack discipline. It is not because you are weak. It is because you are ruled by an internal monarchy that you never chose, one that governs your attention, your emotions, your self-image, your desires, your energy. You are fighting for focus while your mind is ruled by forces that benefit from your chaos. Machiavelli would tell you that the first step to reclaiming your mind is identifying the enemy. But the enemy is not a person. The enemy is not the world. The enemy is not your circumstances. The enemy is not your failures. The enemy is the part of you that clings to pain because it fears the uncertainty of power. Pain is predictable. Strength is not. Toxic thoughts might hurt you, but they are familiar. Ambition feels foreign. Confidence feels dangerous. Discipline feels cold. Focus feels sharp enough to cut. And your mind, conditioned by survival instincts, will always choose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar power unless you intervene. So how do you intervene? How do you seize control of a mind that has rebelled against you for years? Machiavelli would say you begin by breaking the illusion of inevitability. Just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves obedience. Just because a fear arises does not mean it predicts reality. Just because a memory resurfaces does not mean it defines you. Just because a doubt whispers does not mean it carries truth. The first act of reclaiming your mind is refusing to confuse repetition with truth. Toxic thoughts repeat because repetition is how they maintain power. They echo, they loop, they return again and again until you assume they are part of you. But repetition is not reality. Repetition is propaganda. Machiavelli understood propaganda better than most philosophers of his time. He knew that people can be controlled not by force, but by repeated ideas presented with the illusion of authority. Your mind uses the same tactic against you. A toxic thought returns not because it is meaningful, but because the mind believes repetition is helpful. If it repeats the same fear, perhaps you will avoid danger. If it repeats the same insecurity, perhaps you will avoid humiliation. If it repeats the same doubts, perhaps you will avoid disappointment. But the mind does not understand ambition. It is programmed to protect you, not elevate you. And this is why Machiavelli's ruthlessness becomes necessary. Protection without evaluation becomes poison. Fear without scrutiny becomes prison. Doubt without interrogation becomes destiny. The deeper truth is, the mind is not loyal to growth. It is loyal to safety. And the person who wishes to rise must break the alliance between their mind and their past. Because your past is what created most of your toxic thoughts. You are haunted by moments that ended long ago. You are paralyzed by the memory of failures that no longer exist. You are controlled by the residue of fears that belong to a younger version of you. You are weighed down by expectations placed on you by people who no longer matter. You are shaped by wounds inflicted by people who no longer have power. And yet their voices still echo inside you. Their judgments still live inside you. Their shadows still occupy the throne of your mind. Machiavelli believed that no ruler should allow old enemies to continue influencing his present. He would say that you owe no loyalty to the thoughts created by a past version of yourself. That child you were, that teenager you were, that frightened young adult you were, they are not you anymore. They do not get to rule you. They do not get to dictate your choices. They do not get to control your focus. They do not get to shape your future. And yet many people allow their inner child, their inner wounded self, their inner fearful self, to rule their adult mind. This is why deleting toxic thoughts is an act of psychological maturity. It is the moment when you tell the younger version of yourself, I will protect you, but I will not be ruled by you. It is the moment when you stop letting old wounds define your identity. It is the moment when you stop allowing your fears to speak with the authority of truth. It is the moment when you stop letting your past decide your future. Machiavelli understood that rulers must sometimes do what seems harsh for the sake of long-term stability, and so must you. You must be harsh with your old beliefs, harsh with your self-doubt, harsh with your insecurities, harsh with a part of you that keeps you loyal to pain, because there is no scenario where you remain soft and your toxic thoughts willingly surrender. They surrender only to authority. They surrender only to clarity. They surrender only to the version of you that is no longer afraid to lead, and leadership over yourself is the highest form of power. Machiavelli believed that the most dangerous individual is not the one who dominates others, it is the one who dominates himself, the one who is unaffected by noise, the one who cannot be manipulated by fear, the one who does not crumble under pressure, the one who stays focused even when chaos erupts around him, the one who controls the battlefield inside his own mind. When you reach this level of control, toxic thoughts do not disappear, they lose influence, they become background noise, they become echoes without force, they become remnants of an old identity, they become ghosts rather than rulers. But to reach this level, you must walk through the fire of self-confrontation, the fire of emotional cleansing, the fire of psychological sovereignty, the fire of saying no to the weaker versions of yourself, the fire of cutting ties with the identities that limit you, the fire of stripping your mind of everything that was placed there without your consent. Machiavelli would say that you cannot transform a kingdom without first destabilizing the old order. Your mind is no different. There will be chaos as you confront your thoughts. There will be discomfort as you uproot old beliefs. There will be fear as you step into the unknown. But this chaos is not destruction, it is reconstruction. It is the tearing down of a broken system to make room for power. You cannot become the ruler of your mind while still bowing to the thoughts that weaken you. You cannot stay focused while carrying the weight of beliefs that sabotage you. You cannot rise psychologically while staying loyal to the same internal voices that kept you small. And so the question becomes, who will reign inside you? The fears of your past or the power of your future? Because only one can survive. There comes a moment in every human life when the mind begins to betray its owner. It whispers doubts that were never yours, revives memories that should have died years ago, and resurrects the ghosts you swore you buried. You try to ignore them, but they return with sharper teeth, hungrier, more merciless. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that the mind, if left unattended, becomes a battlefield where your own thoughts rebel against you. He knew that inner disorder is the first crack that leads to outer collapse. And he knew that a ruler who cannot rule himself is destined to be ruled by the very forces he fears. The toxic thought is not an intruder, it is a symptom, a signal that your inner kingdom has grown weak. And weakness, as Machiavelli warned with cold clarity, is an invitation for chaos. So when you feel overwhelmed by the noise in your head, when the past drags its chains across the floor of your mind, when your emotions begin to pull you into directions you never chose, you must recognize that you are not dealing with mere thoughts. You are dealing with insurgents. They seek to overthrow your focus. They seek to dismantle your discipline. They seek to replace your strategic mind with a fragmented one. And if you fail to respond with authority, they will consume you. But Machiavelli would never simply advise calm or meditation or empty encouragement. He would tell you that toxic thoughts must not be reasoned with. They must be dominated. They must be confronted the way a ruler confronts an uprising, swiftly, decisively, without hesitation. When a thought rises that accuses you of being lesser than you are, you silence it by acting in direct defiance of its message. When a memory tries to drag you backward, you suffocate it by moving forward with even greater ferocity. When fear tries to paralyze you, you use it as fuel, turning each heartbeat into the first step toward something greater. Not because these actions magically erase the inner noise, but because they teach your mind that you are the sovereign, not the servant. The tragedy of most people is that they feed what destroys them. They replay the poison. They nurture the wound. They romanticize their suffering, as if pain has ever rewarded anyone who worshipped it. Machiavelli would see this and call it what it is: a misuse of mental resources. A ruler who spends his days contemplating his anxieties is a ruler who will lose his kingdom. So too is the mind that obsesses over its own torment. The more attention you give to your toxic thoughts, the more power they acquire. They grow bold, believing themselves untouchable, and the moment you let a thought believe it can dictate your emotions, it begins to dictate your life. The first step, Machiavellian and ruthless, is emotional disengagement, not suppression, mastery. You observe a thought the way a strategist observes an enemy marching in the distance. You do not personalize it. You do not fear it. You analyze its purpose. Does this thought strengthen you? Does it weaken you? Does it move you toward your objective or drag you away from it? Anything that does not serve your ambition is an enemy, and sentimentality toward an enemy is the first step toward defeat. So you strip the thought of emotional weight. You reduce it from a monster to a mere signal. And when a thought becomes a signal, it loses its teeth. The second step is redirection. Not running away, redirection. Machiavelli believed that humans are shaped by the actions they repeat. A man becomes disciplined by acting disciplined. Even before discipline feels natural, a man becomes fearless by behaving as if fear is beneath him, even while fear is burning inside his chest. So when a toxic thought arises, you do not resist it directly. Resistance only creates tension. Instead, you redirect your energy into an action aligned with your desired identity. You train the mind the way a general trains soldiers, through repetition, not negotiation. Over time, the brain learns that your behavior, not your emotions, sets the direction of your life. The third step is strategic replacement. Nature hates a vacuum. If you remove a negative thought without replacing it, the mind will simply refill the empty space with another poison. Machiavelli would tell you that disorder is not defeated by destruction, but by construction. In a kingdom, you eliminate rebels by building stronger institutions. In the mind, you eliminate toxic thoughts by building stronger internal narratives. Not fantasies, not delusions, but beliefs forged from action, evidence, and identity. Each time you act with strength, you create a reason to view yourself as strong. Each time you behave with focus, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who does not waver, and belief, once reinforced, becomes armor. Focus, in Machiavelli's view, is not clarity of mind. It is clarity of purpose. It is the ability to remember what you are trying to build when everything around you tries to pull you apart. It is the willingness to sacrifice comfort, distraction, and emotional indulgence in service of a larger ambition. Focus is not natural. It is unnatural. It is a violent rejection of the chaotic human tendency, and that is why so few achieve it. But those who do become unstoppable. Because while others drown in their own introspective storms, the focused individual moves with an almost frightening calm, carving forward through the fog with the precision of a blade. And then comes the darkest truth Machiavelli understood. Most toxic thoughts are inherited. They are not born inside you. They are implanted. Planted by parents, teachers, failures, insults, betrayals, past relationships, moments of humiliation that still echo years later. You carry voices that do not belong to you, and these voices speak with an authority they never earned. To follow them is to allow your life to be shaped by ghosts. To reject them is to reclaim your sovereignty. So what does Machiavelli demand from you now? He demands that you treat your mind like a state that must be defended. He demands that you govern it with vigilance. He demands that you stop letting memory dictate destiny. He demands that you remove toxic thoughts with the same ruthlessness that a leader removes threats to his power, quickly, decisively, strategically. Because the truth is simple, your life is determined by the thoughts you permit to rule you. And if you allow the wrong ones to take the throne, they will lead you toward ruin. But if you master them, if you dominate them, if you silence the inner rebellion and crown your focus as the rightful ruler, then nothing, not fear, not memory, and your mind, with all its old patterns and impulses, behaves exactly the same way. This is why focus is so fragile. Not because it is difficult to achieve, but because the world does not want you to possess it. A focused individual becomes unpredictable, dangerous, Not dangerous in a violent sense, but dangerous because he is no longer easily influenced. He becomes immune to emotional manipulation. He becomes resistant to guilt, pressure, distraction. And the moment you become resistant, the people who once benefited from your lack of direction suddenly find themselves powerless. They cannot control what they can no longer confuse. They cannot steer what they can no longer distract. They cannot shape what they can no longer weaken. So they turn to the only strategy left: psychological resistance. This resistance does not come in obvious forms. It arrives packaged in gentle criticisms, subtle emotional appeals, nostalgic reminders of who you used to be. But Machiavelli would tell you that nostalgia itself can be a poison. It lures you backward. It convinces you that comfort is more valuable than growth, that familiarity is safer than evolution. Yet safety has never created strength. Comfort has never created clarity, and no man has ever risen to greatness by honoring the limitations of his former self. If you are to delete toxic thoughts permanently, you must also learn to delete the environments that nurture them. A kingdom cannot stabilize while harboring networks of instability. A mind cannot gain clarity while surrounded by chaos disguised as companionship. This does not mean abandoning people. It means redefining the influence they have over you. It means learning that emotional access is a privilege, not a birthright. It means recognizing that anyone who feeds your doubts is an agent of disorder, whether they intend to be or not. But the most dangerous ally of your toxic thoughts is not the world around you. It is the version of you from the past. The one who felt unsafe, the one who doubted himself, the one who broke under pressure, who surrendered to fear, who accepted weakness as fate. That old self is not gone. He is waiting for you to get overwhelmed, waiting for you to slip, waiting for you to hesitate, because he knows that the moment you hesitate, even for a second, he can reclaim the throne. Machiavelli would warn you that old power structures never die quietly. They wait in the dark, patient and watchful, and your weaker self is no different. So what must be done? You confront him, not with hatred, with dominance. You remind him that he is not the ruler anymore. You remind him that his era has ended, that you are building something he never had the courage to attempt, that you are stepping into a life he never had the strength to claim. But you do not destroy him. That would be foolish. Machiavelli knew that even the most ruthless ruler benefits from understanding his predecessors. Your old self carries lessons you cannot afford to forget. Pain that forged your endurance, failure that sharpened your awareness, fear that taught you vigilance. But he must not rule. He must not guide. He must not speak without permission. And then comes the final stage, the reconstruction of identity, because deleting toxic thoughts is not enough. You must replace them with a version of you so focused, so internally disciplined, that there is no room left for mental insurgency. Identity is the true fortress of the mind. Once you believe you are someone who cannot be derailed, toxic thoughts become powerless. Once you believe you are someone who acts with intention instead of impulse, distractions lose their influence. Once you believe you are someone who pursues purpose over emotion, clarity becomes effortless. Machiavelli understood that power is not maintained by force alone. It is maintained by belief. A ruler remains in power not because he is feared or loved, but because people believe he is meant to rule. And you remain mentally sovereign, not because your doubts disappear, but because you no longer believe they have authority. This identity is not built through affirmations or fantasies. It is built through behavior repeated so consistently that your brain begins to respect you. Your mind must learn that you are not its victim. You are its commander. Every disciplined action is a message. Every refusal to be derailed is a declaration. Every choice aligned with your purpose is a step toward building a mental empire incapable of collapse. And as this identity strengthens, something extraordinary begins to happen. Toxic thoughts, once loud and controlling, begin to lose their volume. They shrink. They weaken. They stop arriving as commands and start arriving as faint echoes. Background noise. Impulses without power. They may still appear, but they no longer dictate. They no longer influence. They no longer determine anything. This is the Machiavellian way, not rejection, replacement, not suppression, domination, not emotional indulgence, strategic governance. The mind becomes a kingdom, and you become the ruler who will not surrender the throne. There comes a point in every transformation when silence becomes heavier than steel. When you sit alone with the new version of yourself, and feel the last remnants of your old mind clinging to the edges, trying to survive. They whisper that you're changing too fast, that you're becoming someone unrecognizable, that the world will not understand the person you're becoming. But Machiavelli would tell you that the world is not meant to understand you. The world is meant to be navigated, studied, used as a landscape where your strategy unfolds. Understanding is not a necessity for dominance. Acceptance is not a requirement for evolution. You are not becoming someone unrecognizable. You are becoming someone inevitable. The truth you must face now is the one most people flee from. You cannot build a new mind with the tools that forged the old one. You cannot expect clarity when you still cling to habits born from confusion. You cannot expect focus when you still give your energy away freely. You cannot demand discipline from a life constructed around convenience. And you cannot demand strength while protecting the very weaknesses that once defined you. What Machiavelli understood, and what few ever accept, is that transformation requires sacrifice. Not symbolic sacrifice, real sacrifice. The sacrifice of who you were, the sacrifice of comforting illusions, the sacrifice of mental patterns that feel familiar even as they destroy you. Toxic thoughts thrive in the dark corners of comfort. They grow in the familiar. They cling to the predictable. They feed on routines that protect your old self from extinction. So, if you wish to eliminate them fully, you must wage a final war against the most seductive enemy you have ever faced, the life that no longer serves you. Machiavelli's warning echoes through the centuries. The greatest threats come not from the unknown, but from the known that refuses to die. That includes the people who hold you to old standards. That includes the habits that tether you to old identities. That includes the thoughts that remind you of old wounds. And yet, in this final phase, something else begins to awaken. You begin to feel the emergence of a mind that no longer negotiates with weakness. A mind that no longer worships emotion as truth. A mind that no longer waits for permission to proceed. Machiavelli believed that power belongs to those who seize it, not those who wait for the world to offer it. So when you feel the first taste of mental sovereignty, when you sense that your focus is no longer at war with your doubts but rising above them, you must not slow down. You must not soften. You must not retreat. This is the moment that decides everything. The moment where you either step fully into your evolution or fall back into the comfortable poison of your former self. The truth is that most people never reach this stage. They fear the version of themselves that stands on the other side of psychological transformation. They fear the clarity, the detachment, the intensity, the responsibility that comes with ruling the mind instead of suffering under it. They fear becoming powerful because power demands accountability. Power demands direction. Power demands the rejection of excuses. And excuses are the final refuge of the weak. Machiavelli knew that a man who chooses excuses over power chooses a life shaped by everything except himself. But you are no longer that man. The fact that you have journeyed this far means you have already begun to bury him, and from the soil of that burial rises something sharper, stronger, quieter, more deliberate. A mind that does not break at the first sign of adversity. A mind that does not give oxygen to thoughts that corrode it. A mind that does not confuse emotion with instruction. A mind that has learned to see life through the eyes of a strategist, not a victim. And yet, there is still one final truth you must internalize. Focus is not merely the absence of distraction. Focus is the presence of direction. A ruler does not maintain order by eliminating chaos alone, but by establishing a purpose powerful enough to unify the entire kingdom. Your mind is no different. You are not deleting toxic thoughts simply to live in a quiet mind. Silence is not the goal. Precision is, momentum is, intent is. You are clearing the mental battlefield so your true ambitions can finally march forward without obstruction. You are removing the mental insurgents so your highest self can reign without resistance. You are stepping into a new internal hierarchy where doubt becomes a whisper, fear becomes a tool, and purpose becomes law. This is what Machiavellian focus feels like. Not peace, but control. Not calm, but command. Not emptiness, but direction. And now the responsibility is yours. Everything you have learned becomes useless if not enacted. Everything you have conquered becomes irrelevant if not maintained. everything you have transformed becomes fragile, if not fortified. The mind is a kingdom, and kingdoms collapse when rulers grow complacent. So understand this: with absolute finality, your transformation is not a moment. It is a discipline, it is a practice, it is a state of governance you must uphold daily. And if you fail to rule your mind will rule you. If you fail to build your purpose, your distractions will build it for you. If you fail to strengthen your identity, your weaknesses will resurrect themselves with a vengeance. This is the final Machiavellian warning, but it is also the final Machiavellian opportunity, because now, at this precise moment, you are standing on the edge of something most people will never experience: the chance to take full command of your inner kingdom and rebuild it in the image of your highest potential. You have removed the poison. You have confronted the ghosts. You have silenced the insurgents. Now there is only one step left. The step that transforms understanding into action, intention into reality, clarity into force. And no one can take this step for you, so listen carefully. If you are ready to control your mind rather than be controlled by it, if you are ready to delete every toxic thought that ever tried to dictate your destiny, if you are ready to rise above the noise, the weakness, the fear, the hesitation, the past, then do not wait, do not hesitate, do not soften. Choose your direction, declare your purpose, step into the identity you are meant to build, and from this moment forward, rule your mind with absolute authority, or your mind will rule you. The throne is yours. Take it now.